Hi, welcome to Satsang with Kevin. Many believe that thoughts are an impediment to awakening, that thoughts stand in the way of self-realization. That is not quite the case. Our thoughts will continue as long as we live, to our last breath, as long as our brain is functioning normally. In other words, thoughts are just the normal function of the brain. It's only we who make it a bit of a problem. It's not so much our thoughts, but the relating with those thoughts that becomes a bit problematic at times. And it's the level of belief we have in those thoughts that's particularly galling for us. And all of that can occur on a bit of a sliding scale, depending on how much we're invested in that belief. For instance, I can believe that a dog will chase a cat. I've seen it happen several times. Logic would dictate if I see a dog and a cat together, that dog is going to chase that cat. Usually, from what I've observed, to the detriment of the dog, because the cat usually turns around and swats it. Now, if I see a dog and a cat in the park and that dog isn't chasing the cat, I'm not going to be too bothered by that, because I'm not really invested in it. Unless, of course, it's my cat. However, if the beliefs being undertaken are some that have a fair amount of personal investment in them, then it can become a bit of a problem. Let's take, for example, if I believe that I am, say, Catholic or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist, whatever, or even Democrat or Republican, whatever my belief or worldviews are or appear to be, those become intertwined with this construct of self that I've created over the years. Now, a good measure of how much I've invested in those is to have them challenged. Periodically, people will challenge a belief in a particular system. Now, if I come out swinging on that and feel really offended by the fact that this worldview or this belief is being challenged, it's a pretty good indicator that I'm invested in it very strongly. And sometimes, if it's completely intertwined with my definition of self, it can be extremely destabilizing having that challenged. Now, it doesn't necessarily take somebody else to challenge that thought. A lot of times that these can be internal discussions taking place about worldviews. And it can cause us no end of grief, building these things only to have them torn down when really they don't exist in reality in the first place. They aren't true. And here's why. Let's consider the source. I have a belief. Let's say I have a belief. And if I have that belief, I will be piecing that together with a certain amount of logic or perceptions. And all of those perceptions will be subject to my own personal biases, my old patterns, my DNA, my cultural upbringing, my worldviews, to name a few. So after all is said and done here, this construct, this belief, this weighty belief will have the deep color of my own perceptions in it. And therefore they will be untrue, because they will be biased from my perspective. And the same goes if I hear this from somebody else, or if I hear it from a teacher, or read it in a book. All of those will be subject to personal biases. Somewhere along the way, some human being came up with it and either taught it in a classroom, or sat in front of a video and told you about it, or wrote it in a book. So these things are subject to folly from the start, just by the very nature of who came up with them. So I guess it would be beneficial to ask ourselves, how much do we want to invest ourselves in these, knowing that they are at least partially untrue, that they are subject to folly. It's not sturdy ground to build a temple of beliefs. And even if it were, when we become invested in them personally, we become hurt when they're challenged. And therein lies a source of suffering we probably don't need. So go ahead with the thoughts. Continue having thoughts. You might want to consider dropping the beliefs. It's those that can be an impediment to awakening or realizing your true self. It's not that hard once it's realized that this stuff is just untrue. Hope to see you soon at one of our future satsangs. In the meantime, namaste.